Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, whenever you are listening to this. This is the Industry Transparency Podcast, where we're discussing topics, trends of the natural health and ingredient industry. My name is Steve Imgrund. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for ITC, here with Len Monheit, CEO of ITC. And our expertise is really in consumer insights, business strategy, and the dietary supplement and ingredient industry. And a large part of that is our yearly insight reports. And the newest addition to that is our functional food and beverage of 2025. This is US and UK survey, so not as global as our general supplement surveys. They have information on the EU, on Asia, Australia's in there. So not as broad, but when it comes to applications that are really growing in popularity and demand, functional food and beverages are definitely in that category. We have seen continued demand growth for functional food and beverages, new applications and formats. So Len, kicking off to you to really dive into the details of this new report. So if you had to sum up this year's survey in one sentence for industry leaders, what would that be?
Okay, one sentence is always going to be a little bit of a challenge for me, but we decided to include a deep dive into the brand and ingredient environment around functional foods and beverages in the US and UK. And it parallels very strongly what we found with supplements, that there's a premium value associated with those branded ingredients. And it's a high premium value. And it really does increase for certain of the categories of interest that we do cover, such as prebiotics. So the branded ingredient value, I mean, it can get lost in the food and beverage space, but the consumers, at least by what they tell us, are looking for branded ingredients and are willing to pay a premium for them.
Yep, more of a differentiator. It establishes trust and transparency right off the bat. Are there any shifts that surprised you at all?
We still see the value of sustainability that's coming through. We see influences start to vary a little bit. It's not everywhere a healthcare professional recommendation like it is really, really strongly with dietary supplements. We see some of the changes we've seen is the use of some of their sweeteners in the diets that they're on. We've also added some categories trying to understand where they're willing to pay a premium for healthy alternatives. So we've seen some changes. The overall patterns remain the same. One of the things that maybe counterintuitively that I keep on commenting on is that for much of the sustainability premium, it's actually over-indexing towards males. And that may be counterintuitive to some, but when we see these patterns that continue to resonate and continue to drive the data.
Yep. Okay, well, digging into maybe some of the differences more apparent that we see versus the US and UK, nutrition bars seem to be more of a preference in the UK. Dairy products, fortified dairy, seem to be more of a preference in the UK. So what does that really tell us about the priorities for the market?
It's category independent to an extent. So there are certain things that are parameters right across the board. So the fortified dairy formats really resonate across multiple categories. And I think it gets to this concept of intuitive functionality. It was first presented to me in a lecture from someone from King's College way back, maybe about 20 years ago, when they were trying to force feed functional ingredients into non-intuitive categories. And really, you need to have this healthy aura around it in order to really increase the chances of success. Hence the dairy, hence nutrition bars, hence also for some ingredients, these sports beverages, those types of things. That concept of intuitive functionality establishes a connection. Now, you're also seeing a diversity of formats. What we're also seeing is, and we saw the spike a couple of years ago, less influence on, say, functionalized coffees. So, and that obviously that was driven by the US respondents in our survey in 2023, but we saw many formats increase, but we saw coffee actually decrease.
Yeah, and that is interesting because really the occasion that we're seeing most growth is in breakfast. So coffee obviously kind of goes into breakfast, you know, time of day, but we're not really seeing that with snacks. So breakfast really dominant, snacks really seem to be under indexing. Um, so we're kind of seeing a rethink of what snackable formats are.
We definitely are, and I think part of this is that you've got multiple smaller meals that so when you describe what they're consuming and when they're consuming, they don't even describe it as snacking anymore. It's just another meal. So I think that's
Hmm.
one of the things that's happening. Also, you've got this skew towards earlier in the day. But even 2 years ago, when we did the food and beverage survey, we really did see breakfast followed by lunch, followed by the snacking opportunities. So we had been indoctrinated, I think, in the functional food, beverage, health ingredient space to really look for these snacking opportunities. And a lot of the product formats were tailored around the snacking opportunities. But I think that that may have been a miss or it may have shifted. We started doing our survey in 2021, now done at 23 and 25. And really, we've got consistency in our responses that breakfast is the time, and that is increasing, and it's followed by lunch, and then it's followed by the snacking opportunities, the morning snack versus the afternoon snack. Again, I think part of this goes back to intuitive functionality. You may choose for a snack a already healthy fruit, cheese, whatever, if you're health oriented that way. But when you're looking for the functionalization, you choose something that you can functionalize or that is functionalized for you with ingredients, whether that's a prebiotic in a smoothie, whether that's your collagens, whether that's other things that you can add to the breakfast meal opportunity. So I think that's part of what is going on. And really, it's driven, it's across all demographics. Really, we do splits. We've got the males and females, and we got 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 plus. But it's really anybody under 54. So the two younger demographic sets for each gender that are really on this breakfast and this intuitive functionalization kick.
Yep. So how can you increase the quality or the nutrient density at the meals, not as necessarily in a snack format, maybe with the exception of a sports specific application.
Maybe. And we do know that we look for the
Hmm.
characteristics, what they're looking for, and really nutritional profile is the strongest response in what they're looking for. Um, there's some that are further down the list, which are looking for reduced calories, things like that. But really, a nutritional profile is one of the most sought after broad benefit areas.
Yep. And that kind of leads right into my next question, which is really one of the most interesting aspects for, myself looking through it was the question about paying more for healthier versions of any particular product. So could you speak to more about what that has shown or has borne out?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data. One of the things we did this year is we consulted with some folks that were expert in grocery and retail to make sure we had a broader list of grocery or store aisles and categories. So we've got a much more robust set of data than we did compared to last year. Um, what the data is showing us is that we've got a set of categories that somewhere between 7 to 9% of consumers will pay over 50% more for a healthier version of. But you've also got, in some cases, 25 to 30% of consumers. Again, this is what they say they'll do. They will pay over 25% more for. And it's almost across the grocery store. Okay, it starts with snacks and it start and some of the beverage formats. I think there's dairy formats there that are at the top of the charts. There's some grain formats that are at the top of the charts, but almost across the board, you have got a quarter of your consumers that will pay more than 25% for a healthy version. The way we ask the question is it's a healthier version of an unhealthy product in X category. Okay, we've even got a premium associated with ice cream. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities. Depends on the demographics. It depends on the messaging because their motivation is different. But you combine that with the mealtime opportunities and some of the category specific information we have, such as prebiotics and probiotics and things like that. And you really can map out a picture of where your premium is. And in this case, those premiums are in both the US and the UK.
Absolutely. So really getting clear on how to be strategic, target the right demographic with the right messaging, and that kind of leads us into health concerns. So when we're looking about health concerns and adding that into the picture that we're painting, anxiety and stress, energy, definitely top of the list of health concerns when we're talking about functional food and beverages. But really, how can the industry speak more to this or capture that opportunity?
Well, the way we do it, we've actually identified 32 health areas or health concerns that we do track. And the way we ask our questions is this a concern? Is this a concern you're addressing currently with functional foods and beverages? And then is it a concern that you would like to be able to address with functional foods and beverages? And it gives us a lot of white space, things to visualize and things to work with. Again, when you map that over our 6 demographic areas. So for females 18 to 34, what are their major health concerns? And then what are they currently addressing with food and beverages? Gives you an area. Okay, then you have what they're currently addressing with functional foods and beverages and what they're willing to address with functional foods and beverages. Okay, that's another different approach, but really, really telling information about the target, about that consumer, and where they are right now in their willingness to address. Now, when you take a look at the gap between willingness to address and all those with a concern, that's a different type of gap. That really depends on education, pretty longer term strategy, because right now they're not willing to address, but they got the concern. So will it be science? Will it be story? Will it be a combination? Will it be an associated formula that actually has a couple different ingredients in it? That would be your tactic to get them exposed and willing to address these concerns where they're not currently. So we've got ways of visualizing all of this data, and really it gives you, well, 6 different maps for each set of concerns, for each set of 10 concerns. So we've got about 40 different visualizations of these that can really target the demographic segments. But going back to your first point, anxiety and stress, lack of energy, these types of things are the top dominant concerns. We've seen this in the year-over-year data, and they're really concerns among many demographics. They're high in concern area. They're high in willingness, okay, which is great, but there's still a gap between currently addressing and willing to address. So you've got some opportunities, those are them. And then you also have sleep and other areas that are opportunities for either formulation or co-formulation or thinking about different types of positioning based on what your product format is. So a lot of information that comes from the various data sets and then combining them and really combining them for the specific demographics that you're targeting.
Yeah. So, I mean, and all that's great. Really, we've been talking about using this data to better speak to your target demographic better and more targeted, I should say. But we can also use this data to suss out where to reach them. So US seems to rely more on doctors, more friends and family recommendations. UK seems to rely more on media, as well as dietitians, nutritionists. So with that in mind, how can marketers be thinking about using this data to speak and get their message heard?
Yeah, so where the influence is really, really strong with the dietitians and nutritionists, it's a matter of getting those influencer groups really part of the team. So education, the presentation of the science to those influencer groups, but understand that that is going to be the resonant information source for a certain demographic. So you support that with the data of the target demographic and speak the language of that target demographic. Where it's friends and family, um, well, you've got to understand that there is the power of the network. We've identified that the research that's done by the different demographic groups is a little bit different. In some cases, it's solo, and then they make the purchase. In some cases, especially where they're strong with the friends and family, they'll do a certain amount of research, so they need to be able to find some information online or through the sources from the brands, from the ingredient suppliers. At a certain point in time, they're going to pause and they're going to go to their peer network for validation. So you've got to be able to understand certain demographic groups will have a different pattern, and you have to address it accordingly with your marketing strategy. And we deal with both ingredient companies as well as brands. If you're an ingredient company, this data helps you understand your ingredients and helps you help the brands position to potential target demographics and audiences. If you're a brand, you can break this out and you can have 6 different strategies if you wish based on our data. And we're going to be expanding some of our demographic sets, but you've got at least 6 target demographics that you can map against to try to position your functional food and beverage products. And then you can adjust your formats, you can adjust even your selling strategies, because some are going to do better online, some are going to do better in natural food stores.
Absolutely. Great. So looking ahead now to the next survey, what emerging trend, what question are you most eager to see kind of the continued trend or where things go? You know, GLP-1, are you taking a GLP-1 medication? That was a new question this year for obvious reasons, but is there anything else that jumps to mind?
Well, I mean, we've also added the GLP-1 to the health concerns. So drug-related
Mm-hmm.
issues now becomes a health concern that we can measure against. So that's great. The ability to map and the ways we're mapping the health concerns, willingness to consume versus currently consuming. We're going to be breaking that down into more detail and going to be making that a little bit more practical and useful. So you're going to see a lot more of that. We are heading into the fielding of our 2025 supplement our survey and research. As Steve mentioned right at the top, that's 7 countries. We've been doing that. We do that every year. So we've got a lot of historical data and trending. We're actually up to 30 some odd health concerns in that as well. So getting much more depth and the year over year tracking. And then, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we're actually building stories based on the demographic sets. So the females, 18 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, we will be able to tell mini stories about where they're at in their supplement journeys currently and aspirationally. So we'll be able to do all of that moving forward with the next set of survey data. But we've still got the 6 from the ones we just completed. We're excited about the food and beverage, but the supplement one is going to be extremely practical and useful as well.
Absolutely. So to wrap this up, if you had to really offer one piece of advice or strategy, maybe from an ingredient standpoint, maybe from a brand standpoint, what would be the key takeaway or thing to leave the ingredient suppliers as well as the brands with?
Yeah, on the specifically ingredient side, what I would say is that this consuming willingness to consume against the health concerns, you really see a very, very different visual picture supported by the data for the 6 demographic groups. You can't assume that a single delivery approach is going to resonate beyond one of our 6 currently. So really, you have to identify where your priorities are, or sort of address multiple, but really identify where the priorities are and then take them on their journey. For the brands, this I'm willing to pay X amount more for a healthier version of should be a formulator's, product developer's dream tied to marketing to try to target these consumers who have said they're willing to pay over 25% premium. That's a lot of dollars out there. And then, I mean, even over 10% premium, you're still talking at well over 60% of the consumers. Okay, so from a brand standpoint, that's where I would dig in against the health concerns. On the ingredient side, probably the health concerns driving to lead to a dialogue with your brands about what that data means based on your ingredient.
Fantastic. Well, Len, I think you did a fantastic job breaking down what the data can give you, both from an ingredient brand standpoint, how to speak to your audience, where to speak to them. All of these questions can be answered with ITC data, and looking forward to seeing where we go with the general supplement surveys. More information to come. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of the Industry Transparency Podcast.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Steve. It's been a great dialogue with you, and I want our audience to also look for some special offers as we really start the aggressive promotion of our food and beverage and post those to be available to partners and the industry at large.